My name is Eleanor. I'm 73 years old. The day my son left me at a nursing home, he held my hand, smiled, and said, "Mom, this is only for a little while." I believed him, because mothers believe their children, even when they shouldn't. 6 months later, that same son was standing at my front door, crying and begging for another chance. But before I tell you why, you need to know what really happened. My name is Eleanor. I'm 73 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed there was nothing stronger than the love between a mother and her only son. After my husband, Thomas, passed away, the house became painfully quiet. Every morning, I still made 2 cups of coffee before remembering he wasn't there anymore. I'd catch myself setting an extra plate at dinner, or turning to tell him something funny I'd heard on the radio. Grief has strange habits. It doesn't disappear. It simply learns to sit beside you. My son Daniel started visiting more often after the funeral. At first, I thought it was because he was worried about me. He'd mow the lawn, carry in groceries, and ask if I was taking my medication. I remember thinking, Thomas would be proud of the man we raised. Looking back now, I wonder if he was already making plans I couldn't see. One Saturday morning, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door with a gentle smile. "Mom," he said, "I found a wonderful place where you'll have friends, nurses, activities, people your own age. Just for a little while." I laughed softly. "I don't need a nursing home, sweetheart. I just need my family." He looked away for a moment before saying quietly, "It's only temporary. I promise." That word, promise. It's amazing how one word can comfort you, and later become the one that hurts the most. I packed a small suitcase, 2 sweaters, my favorite family photo, Thomas's old wedding ring that I still carried in my purse, and the knitted blanket my granddaughter had made when she was 10. As Daniel drove, neither of us spoke much. The silence felt heavier than the rain tapping against the windshield. When we arrived, a cheerful nurse opened the door and welcomed me with a warm smile. Daniel hugged me tightly. "I'll come see you next weekend." I smiled back. "I'll be waiting." I watched his car disappear down the road, certain I'd see it again in just a few days. I didn't know then that it would be months before I ever saw my son again. The first Saturday came. I woke up before sunrise. I carefully brushed my hair, put on my favorite blue cardigan, even sprayed the perfume Thomas had bought me on our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look nice when Daniel arrived. Every few minutes, I'd glance through the window. Every car that entered the parking lot made my heart race. But none of them stopped. By dinner time, I quietly folded my cardigan and placed it back in the closet. "I'm sure something came up," I whispered to myself. The second Saturday, I waited again. This time until the sun disappeared behind the trees. Still, no Daniel. No phone call, no message. By the 4th week, even the nurses stopped saying, "I'm sure he'll be here soon." They had seen this before, far too many times. One afternoon, I met a woman named Grace. She was 80 years old and had lived there for almost 3 years. She smiled gently and asked, "First child?" I nodded. "My son." She sighed softly. "They almost always say it's temporary." Her words stayed with me all night. That evening, I finally gathered the courage to call Daniel. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I left a message. "Hi sweetheart, it's Mom. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Call me when you have a minute. I love you." He never called back. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. I stopped wearing my nice sweaters on Saturdays. Stopped sitting by the window. Stopped making excuses for him. Then, one rainy Tuesday morning, the receptionist walked toward me holding a large white envelope. "Eleanor," she said with a smile, "this came for you." There was no return address, only my name, written by hand. I didn't recognize the handwriting. When I opened it, a single photograph slipped onto my lap. It was a picture of my late husband, Thomas. I had never seen before. Someone had written just one sentence. "Your son has been hiding the truth from you." I stared at the photograph for what felt like forever. It was Thomas, standing outside our old house, smiling. But it wasn't the picture that frightened me. It was the note. "Your son has been hiding the truth from you." My heart began to pound. Daniel. Hiding something. I immediately looked for another page inside the envelope. There was only one. A typed letter. No signature. No return address. It read, "Mrs. Eleanor, your son did not place you in the nursing home because he couldn't care for you. He placed you there because he sold your house. I stopped breathing. No, I whispered. That's impossible. Daniel had told me he was only looking after the house while I settled in. He'd even promised. Nothing will change, Mom. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold the paper. Grace, my friend from down the hall, noticed my face. Eleanor, are you all right? Without speaking, I handed her the letter. She read it slowly, then looked up at me. Do you have your house keys? I reached into my purse. They were still there. I'd carried them every single day. Because I believed, one day, I'd be going home. The next morning, Grace's grandson offered to drive us across town. As we turned onto my street, my stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. The flower garden Thomas had planted was gone. The white fence had been painted black, and parked in my driveway was a truck I'd never seen before. I stared through the windshield, quietly whispered, "That's not my house anymore." A young couple walked out the front door, holding coffee mugs, laughing together, as if they'd lived there for years. One of them looked at me, smiled politely, and waved. They had no idea. They were waving to the woman who had lived there for 42 years. For a moment, I couldn't move. The young man smiled kindly and walked toward me. Are you Mrs. Eleanor Brooks? I nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. The previous owner told us, if a woman named Eleanor ever came here, we were to give this to her. My heart skipped. The previous owner. He looked confused. Your son. I lowered my eyes. So it was true. Daniel really had sold our home. The young couple invited Grace and me onto the front porch. We didn't know. When we bought the house, we were told the owner had already moved into assisted living and wanted a fresh start. Fresh start. The words felt like a knife. This wasn't a fresh start. It was the end of the life Thomas and I had built together. I looked through the front window. The living room was completely different. The old rocking chair where Thomas read every evening, gone. The piano Linda used to practice on, gone. Even the curtains I'd sewn by hand, gone. It no longer looked like my home. Only the maple tree in the front yard remained. Thomas planted that tree the week Daniel was born. I smiled sadly. Some things survive, even when everything else changes. Grace gently touched my shoulder. Eleanor, the letter. I looked down. The envelope was sealed with clear tape. Across the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were 4 simple words. For my mom. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there wasn't a letter. There was a cashier's check for $418,000. Attached to it was a handwritten note. Mom, I know you'll hate me before you understand me. Please don't cash this check yet. If you still hate me afterward, I'll accept it. I stared at the check. Over $400,000. But it didn't feel like money. It felt like another question. Another mystery. Why would Daniel sell the only home we'd ever known, then leave every penny for me? Just then, my phone rang. For the first time in 6 months. The screen showed one name, Daniel. I hadn't heard Daniel's voice in 6 months. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, quietly, he said, Mom, are you standing in front of the house? I looked at the maple tree. Yes. His voice cracked. I was hoping you'd never have to see it like this. Tears rolled down my cheeks. You sold our home, Daniel. The home your father built with his own hands. How could you? There was a long silence. When he finally spoke, he sounded nothing like the confident man who had dropped me off at the nursing home. I know what it looks like, but please, give me 10 minutes. I'm on my way. Before I could answer, he hung up. Grace squeezed my hand. Do you trust him? I looked toward the house. I don't know anymore. 10 minutes later, a silver pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Daniel stepped out. He looked thinner. His beard had grown. The confident smile he always wore was gone. The moment our eyes met, he started crying. He walked toward me slowly, then stopped a few feet away. I'm so sorry, Mom. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to walk away. I didn't know which feeling was stronger. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me for months. Why? Daniel took a deep breath, then reached into his truck and pulled out a thick blue folder. He handed it to me without saying a word. On the front were the words, "Final notice past due." I opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, property tax notices, mortgage documents, medical bills, late payment warnings. My heart began to race. What is all this? Daniel lowered his head. Dad never told you. I frowned. Told me what? He looked me straight in the eyes. The house wasn't paid off. I felt the world spin. What? Dad took out a second mortgage during his cancer treatment. He didn't want you to worry. I couldn't speak. Daniel continued. The payments became impossible after he passed away. The bank gave me one final choice. Sell the house, or let them foreclose and take everything. A tear rolled down his face. I thought I was protecting you. I looked at the check still clutched in my hand. Every dollar from the sale had been made out to me. Not him, not his family, me. For the first time, I realized something. Maybe my son hadn't stolen my home. Maybe he had sacrificed his relationship with me to save what little I had left. I stared at Daniel. My fall. He nodded slowly. 6 months ago. The neighbor found you unconscious in the backyard. I searched my memory. Then I remembered. It had been a cold November morning. I was trying to trim the roses Thomas had planted years earlier. I slipped on the wet grass. The next thing I remembered was waking up in the hospital. It was only a concussion, I whispered. Daniel shook his head. That's what they told you. But the doctors told me something different. He reached into the blue folder and handed me another document. It was a medical report. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, Adult Protective Services Recommendation. Below it, one sentence caught my eye. My hands began to tremble. I never saw this. Daniel lowered his eyes. No. The doctors discussed it with me, because you asked them not to worry you with paperwork after Dad's death. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. The social worker gave me 2 choices. Daniel said quietly, hire full-time in home care that I couldn't afford. Tears rolled down his face. I chose the nursing home because I thought it would only be for a few months. I looked at him. Then why didn't you visit me? He closed his eyes. Because every time I tried, I couldn't bear the look in your eyes. I felt like I'd failed you. I thought if I worked harder, sold the house, fixed everything, I could bring you home with a fresh start. His voice broke. But every week I waited. It became harder to face you. I was ashamed. Grace quietly wiped away her tears. She whispered, pride has separated more families than distance ever has. Daniel nodded. I called almost every Saturday. I frowned. What are you talking about? The nursing home. I asked how you were doing. I even sent flowers on your birthday. I was told you didn't want to speak to me. I felt a chill run through my body. What? Daniel looked just as confused. The receptionist said you refused my calls, I whispered. I never refused a single call. Grace looked toward the nursing home in the distance. Her expression changed. Slowly, she said something that made my stomach drop. Eleanor, I think someone has been lying to both of you. The receptionist froze. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw Daniel standing beside me. Eleanor, Daniel, I wasn't expecting. Daniel interrupted her. Were my calls ever given to my mother? She looked down. No answer. I stepped forward. Please, I deserve the truth. The receptionist slowly removed her glasses. There were tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. For months, I told your son you didn't want to speak to him. I felt my knees weaken. And you told me. He never called. She nodded. Yes. The lobby became completely silent. Daniel whispered, but why? The receptionist covered her face. My husband was dying. I was working double shifts. I made a terrible mistake. The first week, I forgot to give Eleanor your message. Then another week passed. I was afraid to admit what I'd done. So I lied. One lie became another. And before I knew it, I had separated a mother and her son. Tears streamed down her face. I have regretted it every single day. I looked at Daniel. He looked at me. 6 months. Gone. Not because we stopped loving each other. Because fear, and one terrible mistake, had grown into a wall between us. Daniel slowly walked toward me. His voice was barely a whisper. Mom, I never stopped loving you. I thought you hated me. I reached out and held his face in my hands. The day you were born. I promised I'd always forgive you. My heart never stopped being your home. He broke down crying. For the first time in months, I hugged my son, not because everything had been fixed, but because the truth had finally found us. The next morning, for the first time in 6 months, I wasn't sitting alone by the nursing home window. I was sitting beside my son. Just like the old days. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. Some silences heal more than words ever can. After nearly 20 minutes, Daniel turned onto a quiet street. I looked out the window. This isn't the way to our old house. He smiled. I know. A few moments later, the car stopped in front of a small white cottage. It wasn't large. It wasn't fancy. But it had a wide front porch, white wooden railings, and a beautiful maple tree in the yard, just like the one your father planted. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed a single key in my hand. Mom, this is your home. I stared at him. What do you mean? He smiled through tears. I used every dollar that was left after paying off the mortgage to buy this house. It's in your name. No loans, no debt, no payments. I wanted to surprise you, but I lost you before I could. I couldn't speak. He continued. I know it will never replace the home Dad built, but I hope it can become a place where new memories begin. I stepped onto the porch. The morning sun felt warm against my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had lost everything. I felt like life was quietly giving me permission to begin again. Daniel opened the front door. Inside, against the living room wall, stood Thomas's old rocking chair. I froze. My chair. Daniel nodded. I went back before the new owners renovated. They let me buy a few things. The rocking chair, our wedding photograph, the old clock from the hallway, even the quilt I'd made 30 years earlier. I ran my hand across the chair, closed my eyes, and whispered, Thomas, we're home. That evening, Daniel cooked dinner, just like his father used to. Half the food was overcooked. The mashed potatoes had too much salt. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. Families aren't healed by perfect moments. They're healed by honest ones. Before leaving, Daniel hugged me tightly. I'm coming back next Sunday. I smiled. You don't have to promise. He looked into my eyes. No, this time, I'll just come. I watched him drive away. But this time, I didn't feel abandoned, because I knew love had never left. It had simply gotten lost, behind silence, fear, and one painful misunderstanding. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are carrying burdens we never knew they were trying to carry alone. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give each other is one more conversation before it's too late. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever forgiven someone after finally learning the whole truth? Share your story in the comments. And if you enjoy heartfelt family stories about love, forgiveness, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe.